I regret marrying someone as immature as Paul. Younger women like you are definitely better. It's embarrassing to be seen with an older woman like you. If only I could turn back time, I'd redo my life. These were the hurtful words my ex-husband Paul uttered a decade ago when we were still together. My name is Jennifer, aged 48. At 33, I tied the knot with Paul, who was 5 years my junior. We met at the hospital where I work as a nurse, and he had just completed his medical internship. Despite the age gap and our differing professional roles, Paul's eagerness to seek my advice and his innocence drew me towards him. Our daily conversations gradually evolved into a romantic relationship. Initially apprehensive about our age difference, I was reassured by Paul's nonchalance towards it. 2 years into our relationship, we exchanged vows. However, after 5 years of marriage, Paul began hurling hurtful remarks, expressing his regret at not marrying a younger woman. He openly flirted with young nurses at the hospital, which I chose to ignore until one day I discovered his infidelity with a former patient, a woman 10 years my junior, already carrying his child. His laughter as he justified his affair pierced me deeply. Unable to tolerate his betrayal, I agreed to a divorce and sought alimony. Naturally, this decision enraged Paul, who believed he should be rewarded for enduring our marriage. His father's indifference to his son's wrongdoing added insult to injury, with Paul adamantly refusing to pay. I reluctantly sought legal assistance. Enduring hurtful remarks during our marriage and facing his infidelity, I refused to back down silently. With the lawyer's guidance, I rightfully received the alimony I deserved. We parted ways and I began living alone, terminating our shared apartment lease. Paul's departure to a new hospital came with more insults, leaving behind judgmental whispers that plagued me. The constant gossip eventually took a toll on my mental well-being, prompting my decision to leave the hospital. After a period of aimless drifting, realizing my love for both work and physical activity, I actively sought out a new professional environment. Fortunately, a small maternity clinic just 2 blocks away from my current residence was hiring nurses. Following the interview, I was immediately welcomed into the team. Despite the clinic's minimal staff of both doctors and nurses, the atmosphere felt warm and inviting, conducive to providing excellent care for patients. During one of the clinic's relatively calm days, a pregnant woman referred from another hospital arrived for her appointment. Upon hearing her name, which happened to be the same as Paul's affair partner, I couldn't help but wonder if it was just a coincidence. Confirming her husband's name as Paul, a doctor, it became undeniable that she was indeed my ex-husband's current spouse. Despite the unexpected encounter, I hesitated to reveal their connection to anyone else. As days passed, I found myself unable to address the situation. Then one day, Paul and his wife came in for a checkup. Paul's eyes widened in surprise upon seeing me, clearly not expecting our paths to cross again. Truthfully, I had hoped to avoid such encounters, especially in a setting like this. "What are you doing here?" Paul's accusatory tone made his wife realize who I was. "Wait, did you come here to harass us?" His words stung, and I struggled to explain that I had been working at the clinic long before knowing of their proximity. Disregarding my explanation, Paul continued his tirade, accusing me of stalking them and causing trouble. Despite being clearly in the wrong, his words drew judgmental stares from those around us, making me feel uncomfortable. Fearing for their safety, Paul's wife feigned distress, insinuating that I posed a threat to her and the baby. With that, the attending physician intervened, urging me to leave the examination room to diffuse the tension. While I understood the necessity of prioritizing the patient's well-being, the encounter left me feeling shaken and unfairly judged. I found myself in a situation I didn't want to be in, feeling utterly miserable. With the details of my divorce now known, something I had hoped to keep private, I became acutely aware of the judgmental glances around me. To add to my discomfort, Paul's wife continued to frequent the hospital, openly criticizing me. Despite everyone knowing I wasn't at fault, as a patient and one with a delicate pregnancy, I felt torn between avoiding upsetting her and respecting her privacy, leaving everyone at a loss for words. Remaining in this environment until her delivery, which was still over 6 months away, seemed unbearable. Despite it being a good workplace, I felt compelled to submit my resignation to the hospital. The director's expression hinted at relief, though I hadn't done anything wrong. I couldn't help but wonder why I deserved such treatment. Exhausted by everything, I couldn't bring myself to search for another hospital job, so I returned to my parents' home. My parents welcomed me without saying much. For a while, I struggled to find purpose, feeling guilty just staying at home without contributing. Eventually, I decided to take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. It was my first time working outside of a hospital, and it felt refreshing, a change of pace. While I loved being a nurse and found it fulfilling, the weight of responsibility in a workplace where lives were at stake was immense. Living away from that environment was beneficial for my mental well-being. I wanted to avoid burdening my parents, so I tried to manage on my own. Looking back, I wished I had returned home sooner. Around 3 years later, while still living with my parents, I received an offer to become a full-time employee at the supermarket. They recognized my hard work, and I was genuinely happy to accept the position. Over the years, I was approached with matchmaking proposals. However, at 45 years old, I had no intention of remarrying, politely declining. I was surprised when the manager insisted that the potential partner was also divorced, similar to my situation. Despite my initial refusal, the offer lingered in my mind. I agreed to the arranged meeting. Considering our mutual maturity, we decided to meet directly without intermediaries. Upon arriving at the designated restaurant, my matchmaking partner was already there. As I entered, he suddenly stood up, causing his chair to topple over. His face flushed bright red, and despite his embarrassment, I couldn't help but laugh. It felt like a scene straight out of a novel. "I'm Edward. Thank you for coming today," he said, regaining his composure. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jennifer." Perhaps due to the initial mishap, we quickly found ourselves at ease with each other. I discovered that Edward had visited our supermarket during a business trip and had been captivated by me at first sight. He had convinced the department manager, who turned out to be Edward Sr. from university, to arrange our meeting. "I'd like to pursue a serious relationship, if possible," Edward expressed. I had come prepared to decline, but unexpectedly, I found myself wanting to see him again. After 6 months of dating, we decided to get married. My parents liked Edward's personality, and they were genuinely happy for us. Our life together, filled with Edward's care and consideration, was truly blissful. Since we were both older, we hadn't planned to have children from the start. However, when I turned 48, my health took an unexpected turn. I wasn't feeling unwell. I was pregnant. I never imagined I'd be pregnant at this age, and certainly didn't expect my discomfort to be morning sickness. I suspect Edward felt the same way when I shared the news. "It looks like I'm pregnant," I said. Edward responded naturally. "That's wonderful. So, who's pregnant? Do I know the person?" "Yeah, I think you know her very well. She's right in front of you," I replied, pointing to myself. Edward looked bewildered, staring at my belly. "Huh? I'm the one who's pregnant," I clarified. He remained silent for a moment, processing the news. Then, with wide eyes, he asked, "Wait, so you mean we'll be parents?" "Yes, it seems that way," I confirmed. "Really?" he exclaimed. "Wow," as he hugged me tightly. I could hardly believe it. "Unbelievable, it's a miracle," I whispered. "Is it okay if I go through with it?" While I had never considered not having the baby, my age was a factor. Thinking about the future made me anxious. Even at the hospital, they asked, "What will you do?" I understood the risks of advanced maternal age for both mother and child. Not everyone would agree with our decision. People might question how old we'd be when our child turned 20. The uncertainty of parenting at this age also worried me. Still, I couldn't bear the thought of ending a life that had taken root. "What are you saying?" Of course, it's natural. Edward's immediate response made me happy. I believed it reflected Edward's genuine feelings. However, after a while, he started worrying about my health. Even for a man like Edward, I could imagine the potential challenges. We discussed it thoroughly, and our desire to have the baby remained unchanged. We began preparations with the doctor's guidance. Both our parents were surprised and concerned, but they were genuinely thrilled. And so it was decided that I would give birth at a well-equipped large hospital. The obstetrician was a very caring and competent doctor, which was reassuring. On one of the prenatal checkup days, not only the obstetrician but also an internal medicine doctor came for extra precaution. Edward was supposed to be there too, but unfortunately he had urgent work and couldn't make it. So I entered the examination room alone. To my surprise, there was my ex-husband, Paul. Honestly, encountering him again in such a place felt unbelievable. A 48-year-old pregnant woman? It's impossible to give birth at your age, he burst out laughing. The obstetrician and the nurse present both had puzzled expressions, but Paul paid no attention. You have no right to say such things. I'm just concerned, I retorted. A grandma getting pregnant? It's gross, he continued. Is that how you treat patients? Even without the anxiety that pregnant women already face, spewing such hurtful words is unbelievable. And you call yourself a doctor? What are you acting all high and mighty for? Besides, this hospital mostly caters to celebrities. Do you even realize that? It'd be better for you to leave before embarrassing yourself, doctor, I retorted. I'll leave without being told. Giving birth in a hospital where doctors like you work? No way, Paul sneered, pointing towards the door. This lady is the wife of the Taylor Group's significant donor. Son's wife, to be precise. I intervened. Huh? You might not know her since you're new here, Paul continued. But before he could say more, Mrs. Taylor intervened. This can't be true, but we're complete strangers. Nevertheless, your recent remarks were way out of line, Mrs. Taylor said. It's hard to believe a doctor would say such things. Edward, my husband, walked in just as Paul turned pale. Sorry for being late, Edward began, sensing the tension in the room. Observing my angry expression, Paul's pale face and the overall atmosphere, he stopped mid-sentence. What's wrong? I was told by this doctor, Paul, that it's disgusting to give birth at 48, I explained. Seeing Edward's concern, his expression changed instantly. Upon hearing those words, Paul stammered, denying the accusation. But Edward pressed on. How can you insult a patient like that? What kind of hospital is this? I can't trust this hospital with my precious wife and unborn child. Just then, the nurse who had left earlier returned with the director, Mr. Taylor. I heard there was some rudeness, Director, Edward interrupted, his frustration evident. I thought this was a reliable hospital because my father recommended it, but I didn't know they had a doctor like this. It seems I chose the wrong hospital. I'm very sorry. No, that's not true. This man is not our doctor, the director clarified, surprising us. I just fired him. Huh? I just fired him, the director reiterated. I didn't know he was such a person. I just let him in because a friend asked me to. We don't need a doctor who spits out such insults. He will never appear in front of Mr. Taylor again. Hey, director, what are you saying? Paul protested. But the director silenced him. Shut up and be quiet. You get out of here right now. Don't ever come near our hospital again, he ordered. Hearing the director's words, Paul protested. But the obstetrician in charge, who was there, dragged him out of the hallway. The director apologized profusely, and we regained our composure and sat back down. However, Edward was still angry. Did you kick him out because my father donated to this hospital? If not, would you let a doctor like him run wild? The director shook his head and explained. Actually, Paul had only been at this hospital for a week. Paul's father was my classmate, and they had a reunion the other day. He asked him to hire his son. He had no idea he was such a person, and he looked truly sorry. Not all the doctors at this hospital were like Paul. The obstetrician in charge was a very good doctor. If Paul wasn't there, I would want to give birth here, I said. And Edward agreed. Edward's father was the president of a large company with branches all over the country, and he donated part of his profits to medical and welfare facilities. His mother had been seriously ill when she was young and had been taken care of by this hospital, so he donated a lot of money. That's why his father recommended this hospital for my delivery. A few days later, Paul contacted me and begged me to ask the director to hire him back. If you ask for him, maybe he'll reconsider, he pleaded. He had often offended patients with his arrogant attitude and had been hopping from one hospital to another. I couldn't believe he kept making the same mistakes. His father had told him that if he got fired again, he would have no future. But I couldn't help wondering if his father's leniency had made him such a man. Edward was next to me when Paul called. He snatched the phone from me and yelled at Paul, threatening to report him to the police for harassment if he ever contacted me or came near me again. He must have been scared because he never called again. Sometime later, I stopped by a convenience store on my way back from the hospital and saw Paul working there. Apparently, no hospital would hire him anymore. He was crying his eyes out, saying that his wife and child had left him. But I felt no sympathy for him. I just decided to avoid that convenience store. The following year, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She was so adorable. I vowed to raise her with love and responsibility no matter what, but Edward was smitten with her from the moment she was born. He seemed to be a very sweet father, so I had to be careful. How did you like this story? Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.